Hey, what's up everyone? It's Justin here and welcome to the review of the Moto G 3rd generation. So this time around, I really think Motorola has done a particularly good job with the Moto G, and that's not to say that the previous models weren't that good, but I feel that the changes made this year really proved itself that it is the go-to smartphone at this price range, which by the way is $179 off contract unlocked. And that is for the 8GB model with 1GB of RAM, but you can also purchase a 16GB model with 2GB of RAM. When it comes to the other specs, it is powered by a 1.4GHz quad-core Snapdragon 410 processor, features the same 5-inch 1280x720 resolution display with on-screen buttons, and in my opinion one of the more significant upgrades this year is the 13MP rear-facing camera, which is a big jump from the 8MP camera which seemingly suffered in the previous Moto G. Some design refinements have also been made to the Moto G, and I think it looks great. It is much reminiscent of the beautiful Moto X, which is coming out shortly. And of course with Moto Maker you have a whole variety of colors to really customize this device to make it your own, and a lot of them look very nice. And opening up the back cover, you are able to swap up the colors, access your micro SD card slot which is expandable to up to 32GB, and also access your SIM card, but the 2470 mAh battery is unfortunately non-removable, like seen in the previous generations. The Moto G itself comes in at 5.59 inches tall by 2.85 inches wide and measures in at 11.6mm, weighing in at 155 grams, which makes the overall form factor slightly larger and heavier than the previous generation, but that really isn't noticeable at all. And in terms of the placement of the buttons and the ports, it is pretty much where you are used to it being. I also can't forget to mention that this Moto G is much more durable with an IPX7 rating, making it water resistant up to 1 meter and 30 minutes. Moving on to the display, however, the 5-inch display comes in at a resolution of 1280x720, which is a PPI of just 294. And although 294 is extremely low compared to pretty much every flagship smartphone out there nowadays, you have to remember that this is not a flagship smartphone. The PPI of 294 is still rather respectable and things still look good on this display. It doesn't really pop out, it doesn't look amazing, it doesn't blow you away or anything, but I can say that the display does look good. The colors are vibrant to a degree and the viewing angles are still very respectable. One great thing about this display, however, with the resolution of 1280x720 is that the battery life on the Moto G is impressive. You can get upwards of 6 hours of screen on time on this thing, which should be easily about 2 days for most people. Moving on to the software, the Moto G runs Android 5.1 Lollipop, and as you know from previous Motorola devices, it pretty much runs stock Android. It is as close as you're going to get. I really don't have much to say about the software except for the fact that it is what you would expect out of Android Lollipop. I really can't notice any differences compared to stock Android, and as you can see there, just pulling down the notification tab, it is what you're used to. On the left side, it is the Google Now launcher, which is easily accessible, and on the Moto G, I really didn't notice any lag whatsoever. Everything was really snappy and the device functioned very well. Moving on to the app drawer, nothing really new there, and holding down your screen you have the customization options that you would expect out of Android. Now heading over to the settings tab, it gives you all of your connectivity settings. You also can make the Motorola yours by using some of Motorola's glancing features, and also stuff like enabling gestures to launch your camera, and personally I'm not the biggest fan of that, but if you are able to enable that from there. But I have to say I really enjoyed the experience, and I think for $179 this device performs amazing, and we haven't even gotten to one of the biggest upgrades, which is the camera. The fact that it is able to run pretty much the latest stock version of Android is great, and considering how great of an experience I had with the Moto G, the way it functioned and the software and everything, it just made me that much more excited for the Moto X Pure Edition. In terms of the gaming experience on the Moto G, I was also quite surprised of that, as there was no noticeable issues in terms of the graphics, drop frames or anything, so that shows that the Snapdragon 410 processor is very capable. But now we're going to move on to perhaps the most exciting new feature or upgrade on the Moto G, at least at a smartphone at this price point. It features a 13MP rear-facing camera with an f2.0 aperture, and one of the things that I noticed with previous budget Motorola devices is that the camera, in my opinion at least, was pretty much unusable. The quality was just so bad that if I were to use a smartphone, I would probably never use the camera. But that's not the case with this 3rd generation Moto G, as the pictures are pretty sharp, the colors are very nice, and although it still can't compare to something like the LG G4 or the Samsung Galaxy S6, the quality here is great and something that you would have never imagined come from a $180 smartphone. With the LED flash, it did very well in low light as well. On the front, you've got a 5 megapixel f2.2 camera, which also looked pretty good, and it is what you would expect out of a front-facing camera in well-lit situations. Moving on to the video quality, the Moto G 3rd generation is capable of recording 1080p full HD video at 30 frames per second, which is what most people would be recording in. You can also do slow motion at 720p. The video quality, I would say, is good. It didn't really blow me away, but it is still better than its price point, and a huge improvement from the previous generations. But generally speaking, I give a huge thumbs up to Motorola for the camera. Moving on to the speakers, you have got a mono one on the Moto G. It is not a stereo speaker, even though it may appear as if it was. Stereo speakers are only available on the Moto X. But before I give you a quick test, I want to tell you that I found them to be pretty loud, but the quality wasn't anything impressive, nor was it bad. But perhaps what kind of wraps it up in terms of this entire review and how great of an experience that this smartphone has been in terms of the design, the performance, the software, and the camera at $180 off contract price point. The battery life is absolutely insane, and although a 2470 mAh battery might not be the prettiest on the spec sheet, with the Snapdragon 410 processor as well as a 720p display having less pixels that have to be powered, Motorola has done an amazing job balancing the performance and the experience with the battery life you were able to get out of this device. The screen on time was about 6 hours, and you can stretch that even further with the battery saving mode. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed my full review of the Moto G, and I have to say, if you have $180 to spend, and that is all you're willing to spend on a smartphone, or if it's the first smartphone for your kid, the Moto G is something you really can't go wrong with. You get a reasonably sized device that is extremely durable, looks great through its customization, has a near stock Android experience, a pretty good camera, and also an impressive battery life. But if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button as it helps the channel out as always, and I'll see you all in the next one.